Today we're going to look at a very simple baking recipe for some cornbread, and I am really excited to bring this to you. I'm on a journey to discover what goes into the food we eat, why it matters, and how we can use this knowledge to make our own cooking taste better. After being diagnosed with 17 food allergies, I'm determined to relearn how to cook, rethink how to eat, and reimagine what mealtime looks like. Today's demo is going to be a little bit more of an experiment. I actually have not made this exact recipe before. I have made a couple of different cornbreads before, but haven't really been satisfied with how they've turned out. So today's experiment is going to be an attempt to make something better. This recipe calls for 6 ingredients: flour, cornmeal, egg, milk, shortening, and sugar. The flour, milk, and shortening will all have to be substituted, and we're actually going to leave the egg out. The first substitution is the shortening. Make sure to double check what vegetable oil shortening is made from, as a lot of shortenings can be made from soybean oil, which is a problem for soy allergies. As you can see here, this shortening is made from palm fruit oil. The next substitution is for the milk. I'm going to use this extra creamy oat milk that I like because it has a similar consistency to milk. It also has an acidity similar to buttermilk. These are the two things that you need to keep in mind when baking with alternative milks: consistency and acidity. I am just using regular cornmeal. I am also using standard cane sugar. Finally, I am using a gluten-free substitution for the flour. As you can see, this flour is made of potato starch and rice starches. Make sure to watch the ingredients of alternative flours if you have other allergies such as almond. We're going to start by setting the oven to preheat to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. We're going to make this cornbread in a 12-inch cast iron skillet. Unlike a lot of baking recipes, we're actually going to place this skillet in the oven while it's preheating to warm the skillet up before we use it later. Next, we're going to prepare the cornmeal. This recipe calls for 2 cups of cornmeal, and we are going to spread this in a thin layer on a baking sheet. Move the baking sheet around and use a flat surface to help spread out the cornmeal more evenly. The goal is to have a thin layer of cornmeal across the entire bottom of the sheet. We are now going to place the cornmeal into the oven to allow it to toast. This toasting process will help bring out a rich flavor in the cornbread. We will leave the cornmeal in the oven for about 5 minutes. Be sure to monitor your cornmeal so that it doesn't burn. If you notice it starting to smoke, pull it out right away. The toasted cornmeal will have a darker color and a distinct smell. We will now transfer the toasted cornmeal into the mixing bowl. I find this is easier if I use a rubber spatula to help push the cornmeal into the bowl. Be sure to scrape the pan so that you get as much of the cornmeal as possible into the bowl. Now that we have the cornmeal in the bowl, we're going to add the 1 cup of sugar. This will help add some sweetness to the cornbread and prevent it from tasting bland. Go ahead and mix the cornmeal and sugar together until they are combined. There should be no noticeable clumps of sugar or cornmeal left, but rather an even mixture. Next, we will add the 2 cups of flour and once again stir until all ingredients are combined. We are again looking for a nice even mixture with a consistent color throughout. Now we'll add the 2 cups of oat milk. Go ahead and again mix the ingredients until they are thoroughly combined. At this point, you'll notice that the batter is very thick. This will result in a thicker, denser cornbread. If you would like to lighten the cornbread up, I would recommend trying some baking powder. I plan on doing this in the future. At this point, I would also recommend adding some salt to help bring out the flavor in the finished cornbread. I also plan on trying this next time. We will now remove the hot pan from the oven. At this point, we will have to work somewhat quickly as we do not want the pan to cool down. Measure out the 1 cup of shortening and add it to the pan. You will see the shortening start to melt as soon as it comes in contact with the pan. This is good and what we are looking for. Gently stir it around until it is completely melted and there are no more lumps of shortening left. Also swirl around the pan a little bit to make sure that the bottom and sides are thoroughly coated with the melted shortening. This will help prevent the cornbread from sticking to the pan and will make it really simple to pull the cornbread out of the pan once it is done. We're now going to pour the melted shortening into the batter. And at this point, we're going to mix all the ingredients together until they are combined. You're going to want to make sure that there are no pools of shortening left. This is the final consistency of the batter. If it's too thick for your liking, you can always add a little bit more of the oat milk to help thin it down. We will now pour all the batter into the hot pan. You may notice some of the shortening pooling up around the sides, and this is exactly what we're looking for. Use a spatula or some other flat surface to flatten out the batter so that it is even and consistent across the entire pan. Having too much of the batter lumped in the middle will result in the middle being raw while the outsides are overcooked. Spreading it out evenly will help the cornbread cook thoroughly. We're now going to go ahead and place the cornbread into the oven and let it bake at 450 degrees Fahrenheit for about 15 minutes. Keep in mind the baking time is very sensitive to how thick your cornbread batter is. If you use a different sized pan, the thickness will change and the baking time will have to be adjusted accordingly. The best way to tell if your cornbread is done is to take a wooden skewer or toothpick and stick it in the middle of the cornbread and pull it out again. If the toothpick or skewer comes out clean, meaning there's no bits of cornbread stuck to it, then your cornbread is done and ready to be removed. If bits of cornbread are stuck to it, then go ahead and leave the cornbread in the oven for a little bit longer. When your cornbread is done, we'll go ahead and remove it from the oven. You should notice the surface of the cornbread cracking a bit and the outside starting to turn a golden brown color. You can adjust the level of this golden brown color by adjusting the cooking time and temperature. Also note that more moist cornbread dough will result in fewer cracks like this forming. There's nothing wrong with the cracks, but it comes down to personal preference. One option for presenting the cornbread is to simply leave it whole inside of the cast iron skillet and add some garnish on top. I couldn't think of anything very fancy since this is the first time I've done this, so I went ahead and just added some chopped green onion onto the top of the cornbread. While the arrangement could certainly be improved, the bright green color adds a nice contrast to the yellow and golden brown of the cornbread. Of course, once you are ready to serve, go ahead and cut up some more or less pie-shaped pieces. These pieces also present plenty of opportunities to garnish as well. For this, I'm just going to place a strip of green onion to help contrast with the angles in the slice of the cornbread. And then I'm going to finish by drizzling some honey across the top. Normally I would go with either onion or honey, but the two combined actually weren't as bad as they sound. And there we have it, our completed cornbread. I'm pretty happy with how this came out, although for next time I think I'm going to add a little bit of salt to help bring the flavor out more. I'm also going to add some baking powder to help the cornbread rise a little bit to be more like a lighter, cakier bread. And I'm also going to add in just a little bit more of the oat milk to provide some more moisture for the bread. And now it's time to enjoy. Now there is one little thing that I didn't quite let you in on. About halfway through baking the cornbread, I realized I had left out the banana. Now, this ended up not being a big deal. I actually really enjoyed how the cornbread came out without it, and I think going forward I'm going to leave it out of future recipes. This is just an example of how behind the scenes cooking isn't always a perfect process, and nor should it be. It's about fun and experimenting and really enjoying yourself while making great food. You'll notice that I will get messy a lot, I will spill things in the kitchen, sometimes when I'm pouring ingredients I don't always measure them perfectly, and really, that's okay. I always view a kitchen as something that's there to get really messy, as long as it's cleaned up afterwards. I'm actually really excited with how the results came out, and this is a recipe I plan on keeping going forward. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Doing so will really help me out and enable me to keep bringing you some awesome cooking ideas. See you next time!